I hope you've all heard our story, but of course I can't resist telling it wherever we go. November of 1999, our Patrick woke up one morning with some blood blisters in his mouth. And as you can see from these pictures, in the top picture in particular, he and his wife had just given us our first grandchild only 6 weeks before he had these peculiar symptoms. And Mark and I were concerned, but we heard, he had symptoms, but that he'd go to the doctor and find out what was going on. Well, they did a blood count and found that his platelet count was dangerously low, and immediately he was admitted to the hospital with a diagnosis of the autoimmune disease ITP. Well, we thought, we'll go to Texas where they lived. We had just been there when the baby was born. We'll go hang out with the baby, help out with the family, because Pat will only be in the hospital for a few days, and frankly, there won't be any other grandparents around like there were 6 weeks earlier, so this will be some private time for our family. Well, obviously, that's not what happened. He became increasingly ill very quickly, and Mark and I basically moved into the hospital, realizing that we could not pull ourselves away from him. And as he got increasingly ill, it became evident that this gruesome disease of his was not going to get better. We were, however, completely shocked when he died. We never imagined that would happen. And, I know all of you as nurses have been around families like ours. You go through this incredible emotional roller coaster. He was in the hospital for 8 weeks. Much of that time he was on a ventilator because he was bleeding heavily into his lungs. And you suddenly, it's over, and now what in the world do you do? Well, for us, we needed to somehow figure out how to fill this gaping hole in our hearts that his death had left. And we never imagined we could think of anything positive again, but we knew we better find something because life had to go on. And as we reflected back about his 8 weeks in the hospital with his wife, Tina, who you see in these pictures, we realized together there was only one thing that was positive in that whole experience of 8 weeks, and that was Patrick's nurses. They were, of course, clinically excellent, but I have to tell you, we expected they would be. We knew he was in great hands. He was in 2 different hospitals and on an ambulance plane with me in between them. The competence we experienced was just as you'd want it to be. His nurses were on top of crises that could have killed him before he actually died. They were great with all the technology. They were wonderful from a clinical standpoint. But what really got our attention was the way they delivered their care. They were so wonderfully compassionate and sensitive and kind, not only to Pat, who, as I said, for the most part, he was totally sedated, but to all of us in the family. They weren't just Patrick's nurses, they were our nurses. And what we felt compelled to do right after he died was simply to say thank you for what you nurses do every day. We were pretty sure that what we had experienced was not unique to the nurses who cared for Patrick. This is who nurses are, and we needed to express our gratitude for the commitment you've made to the rest of us. So that night over that liquid dinner in Amarillo, Texas, we created the DAISY Foundation because DAISY stands for us, Diseases Attacking the Immune System. It keeps us rooted in Patrick's story and in our personal experience with his nurses. And we loved the DAISY image because, as I said, we had a really gruesome experience with Pat, and we needed to replace the hideousness of those last weeks with something beautiful, and what's more beautiful than a simple daisy? Well, long story short, just about 20 years later, who would have imagined? You all, as nurses and nurse leaders, got a hold of this program, Mary Ann, right at the start. And all of a sudden, we find ourselves with over 3,700 healthcare facilities and schools of nursing committed to honoring nurses month in and month out across the continuum of care, including those 235 schools of nursing, because we're also honoring faculty and students. And we're doing all this in 22 countries around the world, of course, in every state in the United States. More than 120,000 nurses have been honored so far, but the statistic you heard before from Deborah that is most compelling and most meaningful to us is the fact that more than 1.3 million times a patient or a family member or a coworker has stopped and taken the time to tell their story of what a nurse has meant to them. And really, that's what we wanted the DAISY Award to be here to do. I must admit, we never thought it would be done this much, but we wanted it to be an opportunity for others to share their stories about what nurses mean to all of the people you care for.
We had the opportunity a few years back to talk to the commander of the Walter Reed Military Hospital. He was a physician, he was an admiral in the Navy, and he had spent his whole life in the military. And I said, why do nurses do this? And he said, that's because nurses are heroes, and that's what heroes do. And he said, Medal of Honor winners, Purple Heart recipients, and nurses are America's heroes. And boy, did that make an impression. That answered the whole thing right there. And the thing that is true, this is not dramatic, this has actually happened. During the ceremony itself, the soldier who nominated the nurse read this beautiful story. We got all done. He looked up at her and he said, you're my hero. And she said, I'm just doing my job. So it is what it is. So I say that story because just doing your job, you really, really, really do make a difference. You make the world a better place every single day, what you're doing. And I want to conclude my brief talk by just saying thank you, and a few thank yous that have come down over the years. Thank you for going to the store to buy that special ice cream for your patient that had no appetite. Thank you for staying past your shift with the dying patient when no one else could, because you know no one should ever die alone. Thank you for making sure that Tiger and Pooh Bear are in the recovery room when your one young patient wakes up from surgery. Thank you for going through the trash in the basement to find an elderly patient's treasure that housekeeper had thrown away because they thought it was trash. Thank you for sending the cancer patient home with a smile and the courage to fight the long months ahead. Thank you for working with transport to take the patient up to the roof so he could have one more look over the town and the hills that he loved. Thank you for giving a shave and a haircut to the homeless man after he had died, so his parents who hadn't seen him in 3 years would remember him as he was, not what he had become. Thank you for smuggling Cotton the dog into the patient's room so he could say goodbye to his special friend of 11 years. My personal favorite, thank you for bringing in a bottle of gin and vermouth so the couple that had been married for 63 years could have their nightly cocktail while she was recovering from a fall. And a couple of personal thank yous. Even though Pat didn't eat anything, thank you for fixing that special anniversary spaghetti dinner for he and Tina to celebrate their anniversary. Thank you for spending your free time in his room playing Trivial Pursuits when Pat couldn't sleep. But most of all, thank you for that hug when support was turned off. I will never forget that. So just keep on doing your job. Don't do anything special. But thank you so much for being nurses. You are my hero. Thank you.
I'm not sure if some of you may know Matt Mahar. Anyone know Matt, who's our new emergency preparedness individual? Matt's wife makes quilts. And Matt was telling me about this one day when we were talking, and I started wondering, I wonder if, for a fee, she would make a quilt. And so we worked with the Daisy Foundation. She made a beautiful quilt. We're starting a tradition tonight, okay? It's actually for Queen, and it has an extraordinary nurse. So we captured Daisy, and if you can flip it over, obviously we captured Daisy. On the side here, we have the values of, I folded it the wrong way. Our values. So what we did was we went back. So we've been doing Daisy now for several years. We went back and looked at them all. There were maybe 9 nurses that looked at the various Daisy awardees, and they narrowed it down to 1. And this one Daisy awardee is going to receive this quilt tonight. Beth McInnis. go. We're going to tell you why Beth is receiving this special award tonight. Come on up here. I'm going to have Chris read it. I'm going to try to straighten it out so you can see it better. Here, I'll trade spots.
Yeah, hold that. There we go. I'm going to stand over here so I can see.
I know where you work, but everybody doesn't know where you work.
Okay. Yes.
You are Rumford. Yes, I'm Rumford. Very good. Chris is going to read why you received.
This is why Beth was nominated. Beth has always been a role model for not only the nursing profession, but for life in general. She is driven by being positive, proactive, and compassionate in all she does. Recently, Beth completely went above and beyond for patient care at Rumford Hospital in our OB department. As we know, maternity nursing provides us the chance to be a part of a patient's most joyous moments. However, painfully at times, we are part of their most tragic moments. While caring for a mother who lost her baby halfway through pregnancy, each team member wanted nothing more than to ease the inevitable pain of this loss. Desperately, searching stores in our unit yielded some items to be needed to create a memory box. But our supplies were limited. Despite working a 12-hour night shift, thank goodness, as a nursing and supervisor, Beth left work and purchased a preemie outfit, but worried it may still be too big. Instead of calling it a day, Beth went home and altered it to the appropriate size and returned it to the hospital hours after her shift had ended, outfit in hand. I was speechless for so many reasons, but completely inspired by her selfless actions. Since then, Beth has gone above and beyond to find items for future memory boxes to have available for grieving families. Beth is truly a special person and a remarkable nurse who we are all privileged to work with. This was back in October. Very nice.
Thank you for what you do every day. Every day you touch lives. Believe it. Central Maine strong, right, Jeff? Central Maine strong. Okay, thank you very much, everyone.